Early last year, a commenter encouraged me to make this video, so better late than never. In this episode, I upgrade my budget PC with budget parts and count the savings from nickel and diming. This is my main computer that I use to run Studio, edit video, and occasionally play World of Warships or Azure Lane. None of these taxed the existing hardware that much, but multitasking enough could make it chug enough such that I decided to upgrade. My existing build had an Intel Xeon E3 1230 V3 CPU, basically an i7-4770, paired with 16 GB of no-name DDR3 memory and a GB GTX 960 4GB WindForce. For storage, I used a Samsung Evo boot drive and a WD Blue media drive, and everything connected to a very cheap, potentially region-specific Gigabyte B85M D2V M80X motherboard. My Cooler Master Hyper 212 was entirely overkill for a stock 80-watt CPU, but the fan spun slowly and the noise stayed low. I got the Corsair CX430 PSU second or maybe third hand, but I actually got the Cooler Master Q300L enclosure new. The case has no outstanding features, but the side-mounted front panel works well with my setup. I paid $441 for these mostly used parts between 2019 and 2022. As for the new parts, I probably overpaid a little for a brand new, just released AMD Ryzen 5 5500, but it remains a really good value chip, albeit at a much lower nominal price. The 6-core, 12-thread CPU outperforms my old Xeon by more than a factor of 2, though the E3 1230 V3 came out almost 10 years ago. Memory comprises 16 GB of sort by lowest price, DDR4 2133 MHz RAM, but at least it comes from a recognizable brand like Micron. Tech Media does suggest that Ryzen performance scales pretty favorably with faster memory, but it looks like low double digits in pretty specific workloads to me. The motherboard is another sort by lowest price special, but again from an actual brand. I don't need anything more than a basic feature set, and the Asus Prime A520M-A probably improves upon my old Gigabyte board. I also bought it new, albeit open box, and with an extra I/O shield. More on that later. Finally, Intel Arc might be a bit of a meme at this point, but I really wanted to try it out and do an AMD CPU, Intel GPU build. The A380 doesn't offer much more performance over my GTX 960, but it theoretically has more features and could theoretically get a lot better with driver updates, etc. I had a surprisingly hard time locating a reasonably priced A380 considering the lackluster launch. In late 2022, presumably already after the pandemic GPU apocalypse, I could not find a new card below $200 despite the $140 MSRP. And I eventually had to win an eBay auction to get a used ASRock A380 Challenger 6GB for $104. If I were to buy a serious GPU, I would probably get a used GTX 1660. They go for less than the A380 MSRP, and they offer significantly more performance, though they have fallen a bit in the value rankings as of this writing. Do note that all my pricing research comes from the second half of 2022. I didn't want to pull my old parts until I knew all the new ones actually worked. So I decided to run them on their own with a spare PSU. Specifically, I worried that the Prime A520M-A would need a BIOS upgrade in order to run the 5500, but luckily the combination worked fine. I dodged that bullet, though I'm not entirely sure if the board had the latest update or if it actually didn't need the latest update. With that out of the way, I could do the actual upgrade, but not before I dust out my case with a small hand pump. With the right nozzle, this is a great reusable alternative to those awful compressed air cans. Afterward, I removed and installed the motherboard, CPU, and memory as a single piece. At first, it seemed like my Hyper 212 needed a new bracket to fit AM4 sockets, but after messing with it a bit, it seemed like one of the included clips would work. It doesn't feel particularly tight, and I can't rotate the tower either, but it does apply enough pressure to keep the CPU temperatures in check, so good enough, question mark? I wanted to add a third 2.5-inch drive for extra storage. The case has two 2.5-inch bays in the front and a 3.5-inch bay in the back. I decided to buy an adapter instead of zip ties, but I managed to find a cheap one that could hold a pair of 2.5-inch drives. The clips felt a bit tight, and the tapping screws felt a bit sus, but for $10, I got what I paid for, and better than zip ties. Even for cable management, I still mostly use twist ties as opposed to zip ties, since I can undo them more easily. The paid value of all the parts in the new build is $584, though these panning shots still show my GTX 960 because it took so long to track down an A380. For all the new parts I bought in 2022, the Ryzen 5500, the 16GB of DDR4, the Prime A520M, and the A380 Challenger, I paid $417. So, on my $584 build, I saved $167 by rolling over old parts. That doesn't sound like much since the entire build doesn't cost that much, but it does amount to almost 30%. But wait, there's more. I sold some of the old parts, the 16 GB of DDR3, the Gigabyte motherboard, the GTX 960, and the extra I/O shield from the new motherboard, all for $150. This is hugely overstated because of eBay fees and shipping cost, but it does represent the value of said parts if, say, everything sold locally for cash. I could have gotten another $30 for my old Xeon, but I gave it to my brother instead. Including that would have put the total out-of-pocket cost at just $237, less than half of the nominal price of the system. I would also add that everything does work, and I have been running the system for a few months already. And that's all the nickel and diming on the quote-unquote new build and the end of the video, so have a nice day.